Hi, everyone. I'm Marina Hatsopoulos. Our world turned upside down when COVID hit, and Greece has just gone back into lockdown this week. Thankfully, we have our compatriot 𝗛𝗲𝗶𝗶𝗲 from Pfizer on the job. Among the hardest hit were certain retailers, which were already facing massive changes over the last decade due to digital transformation. Today, we'll hear from Niko Bonatsos of General Catalyst, who will be probing these issues with George Bousis from Raise, and we'll hear which of these changes will remain post-COVID. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box during the Zoom session. This event is brought to you by the Hellenic Innovation Network with the support of MIT Enterprise Forum Greece and the Greek Consulate of Boston. You can register at hellenic.org to find relevant news and events and to connect with other members of the community. Now I'd like to introduce to you Stratos Efthymiou, the Consul General of Greece in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina, and hi everybody from Boston. I'm really glad that we managed to organize this webinar, which we had to postpone in the summer after having consulted with both George and Niko following George Floyd's death and the Black Lives Matter crisis. I think this tells a lot about both of them, as well about our organization, which supports a kind of entrepreneurship that respects diversity, racial equality, and inclusivity. I have to admit that I admire both George and Niko. George Bousis has a fantastic business story to share with us, and I'd like to know more about his views on the impact of the pandemic on the retail sector, and especially the opportunities for the digital transformation of Greece. Nikos Bonatsos has been always here helping the Hellenic Innovation Network with his creativity and great spirit, helping us bridging coasts, geographies and ideas. Many thanks to both of them, to both of you for your time, commitment and 𝗶𝗶𝗶. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to Vassilis Papakonstantinou, the Vice President of the MIT Enterprise Forum of Greece, whom I would like to thank once more.
Thank you, Stratos. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another exciting podcast with two very special guests, Niko Bonatsos and George Bousis. But before handing over the floor to our guests, let me share some news about MIT Enterprise Forum Greece. We have just launched the 7th edition of the MIT Enterprise Forum Greece Startup Competition. For those of you that may not be aware, this is a very demanding acceleration program for technology ventures that is based on best practices and content from MIT's entrepreneurial community. Over the course of 4 months, participants are expected to receive practical knowledge through highly curated workshops, hands-on advice from mentors, and premium global networking that will help them propel their ventures to new levels. We have 3 tracks, one general, one focusing in energy, and another one focusing in maritime. Applications will be open until the end of December. The selection will take place in January, and the platform will run entirely online from February until May. If you or somebody you know have a venture in technology, you are more than welcome to apply. To know more about the competition, go to our website, www.mitfgreece.org. There you can also sign up to become a judge or a mentor for the acceleration program. So tonight we have the pleasure to have Niko Bonatsos as our moderator. I have to personally thank Niko for recently joining the board of directors of the Hellenic Innovation Network. It's great to have you on board. Niko Bonatsos is the managing director at General Catalyst, a venture capital firm with approximately $5 billion in total capital raised. Working from San Francisco most of the time, Niko focuses his investment strategy on finding first-time technology founders with a strong product instinct, a robust appetite for learning, and a desire to create innovations that will potentially benefit millions of people. In his 9 years at General Catalyst, Niko has been instrumental in the firm's investment in Atrium, Audios, Cover, Hive, and many others, including Snap. Prior to joining General Catalyst, Niko has attended Stanford University as a Fulbright scholar, earning a master's in management science and engineering. He has also received degrees in other countries in manufacturing and management and electrical engineering. Niko, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Καλημέρα και καλησπέρα από την Αθήνα. Thank you, Vassilis. Thank you, Strata, and thank you, Marina, for having us all. I'm excited to be welcoming my friend, my 𝗛𝗲𝗹𝗶 George Bousis, on this show today to talk about recent trends on e-commerce as well as retail, of course. So would like to make this a little bit conversational as well. So feel free to ask any questions that you have on the chat, as well as the Q&A here. So with that, let's get going. George, I know you come from a family of retailers and grocers, so would love to hear from you in plain English a little bit about your family's story, because it has a very strong Greek connection.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. Luckily, I wasn't asked to do this in Greek because I'd have to practice a lot more. But in any event, yeah, obviously being Greek and our entire culture and traditions and our values and everything has played a really big role and impact in my life and my family's life and everything. My parents come from really humble beginnings in Greece. My father's from just outside of Argos. My mother is from Tripoli. And they have had their own entrepreneurial journey coming from Greece as really young children, and the classic struggles and the hard work to build a better future and an opportunity for their children. Fortunately, growing up, I saw my father start a business. What began as a small little bodega in Chicago, 1,500 square feet or so, turned into a large major grocer in the Chicagoland area. And I saw that kind of in my lifetime. So my family going from, a relatively humble beginnings to, what it is today in building our family business. And all of us as young kids were involved in one way or another in the business. I think more so my older brother over the years, who still is involved and helps run the business and has his own set of stores. But they were really the pillar and the example for us, and why we were so lucky to have them. And I think that's really inspired all of us and my siblings alike, and has helped us achieve our goals and our dreams in entrepreneurship. All of us have kind of gone on to start our own businesses in one way or another. I think my brother, obviously starting in the family, my sister going on to do her thing, across MIT and in production and VR, my middle brother in fashion. And so, I think it's really started with my parents and cascaded to all of us. And so, I think the pressure was on when I started my business to do something and build something great. But yeah.
Terrific. So before we start talking about Raise, how come when you ended up staying in the industry? Walk us through your early beginnings, and what was it that really got you excited about starting Raise?
Sure. So, I've always been really passionate about technology in general. And what started off as gaming when I was a kid growing up, I was a professional gamer before it was cool and before it was what it is today. I was a pretty nerdy kid growing up, but I played professional esports and gamed, and that was kind of my first introduction into technology and whatnot. And as I grew up, it was always something I was wildly passionate about. I was always interested in doing more and building things and in helping people and creating something at a much larger scale. I thought much larger. And not to say that there wasn't a huge opportunity in our family business, because it has continued growing even through building Raise today at a really fast pace. But, one, I would say, I was always passionate about technology, but two is, I found it difficult to work for my dad, in all honesty. I think he had his own way of doing things. And you can't blame him, because obviously it's worked in spades and has worked really well. But, I would want to do things in loyalty and technology and make investments. And, my dad being super scrappy and having built the business from nothing, was hesitant to make a lot of those investments and do those things. And I felt like I wanted to do more. But I'm lucky that I started with my father and worked with him, because I don't think Raise would have happened had I not started there and learned what it was like working with customers, understood what they were looking for, understand retail in general, and the whole idea of gift cards and what came to be Raise really started working under my dad and at the stores.
Okay, so you started Raise about 6 years ago now, right?
7. I feel like it. Well, it's a little bit more, but we launched it 7 years ago. I feel like it was a lifetime ago, but yeah,
Totally.
we launched the site in 2013.
So what was it in the beginning that made you convinced that there was an opportunity there? And if you can, just walk us through the Raise story, like the ups and downs and where we are today.
Sure. So, when I talked about getting started in my father's business, we were looking at other ways to generate revenue beyond just what we were doing in the store, at that moment in time. And so I thought gift cards were super interesting, racks, gift cards, the opportunity to drive additional revenue, breakage, offer our own gift cards. So I started really going deep in that category. And there's a couple things that stood out to me. One is that tens of billions of dollars of gift cards go unspent and unused every year. So massive opportunity, ton of fragmentation. I saw that there was a huge digital transformation in gift cards, where they were going from physical cards that you were buying on racks to digital ones, with the introduction of wallet on our phones, and a bunch of other features. And so, in doing my own research, I was like, wow, this is going to become a really big business. Somebody should do something about this. And this is at the time in Chicago where you started seeing the rise of Grubhub and Groupon, and the technology scene was really developing here. And I knew that San Francisco wasn't an option for me or elsewhere, given that I was the baby in the family. I was really close with my parents, and I think I'd be ultimately guilt tripped by my mother if I did go. But I chose to stay here, and I started the business literally in my apartment, working nights and weekends, recruiting people from 2 places. One was from Craigslist, so recruiting random people, because I didn't know how to hire people or find people before that. Probably not the smartest thing, looking back, having random folks from Craigslist at my house, but I was a pretty big kid, and I thought I'd figure that out at the time. And the second one is funny, is actually from our priest at our church. I ended up asking him, who are some good Greeks that are looking for jobs that I can trust? And I knew that I can trust our local church and father to help us, guide us in the right direction. So the company almost started as like a big Greek family. There were Greeks doing everything. It got even to the point where I had a cousin of mine that I had never met before, who came from Greece, who was like, I'm just looking for an opportunity. I want to build something cool. And he started cooking in the office, and it was totally illegal, and we probably should have never done it. But he was cooking breakfast and food, and everybody was in food coma by 3:00, and ice cream and waffles. And I think that's probably why I gained a ton of weight in the process. But it was a fun little family, and we were going after a really big opportunity. And I saw that opportunity as building a marketplace for gift cards, essentially creating liquidity in an exchange where individuals like you and I can sell a gift card or store credit for cash that we weren't going to use. Let's say we weren't coffee drinkers and wanted to sell a Dunkin' or Starbucks card. And by creating a marketplace, it gave buyers on the other side who were fans of those brands or those products or items the opportunity to buy it at a discount. And so we started off with that. In the beginning, I have a whole ton of funny stories that I don't think we're going to have time to talk about how I manufactured a lot of that growth. But, there's some funny videos online, I'm sure, that the folks tuning on here can hear and listen to, as far as how that company was built.
And we met thanks to the magic of the internet. I think we met on LinkedIn, like you had emailed me back in the day on LinkedIn saying you're a handsome Greek young guy who seems to be good at helping out young companies, and we have momentum. And I took the call, and next thing I know, few months later, we became friends. Unfortunately, we did not invest at our firm, but we became friends, and afterwards we became 𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶. But since then, the company has had several lives. So where are we today? Where is Raise today?
Yeah, so one, I'll take a step back. It's funny. I called Niko the Greek Tom Cruise, and I reached out to him and was kind of cracking a couple jokes with him. But yeah, I blindly reached out to Niko on LinkedIn. You know, this is kind of early days in LinkedIn. I was like, let me find another Greek that's young to ask for advice and get his help. And I kind of cold emailed him. We jumped on a call, and he's like, you need to raise money right away. You have an amazing business. You know, I want to help you out. And I admittedly had never raised money. I mean, we raised money from my mom. You know, who had helped us out secretly without telling my dad for the first couple of years. And so, you know, with Niko's help, I probably owe a lot more to you than I give you credit for. But he kind of walked me through and taught me how to raise money, how to, you know, build a deck and do all these things. And, you know, shortly thereafter, we went out and raised a $20 million Series A, which was huge. I mean, it was more money than we ever thought we would ever raise. But, you know, that's when the hard work started. It's like, now you got to figure out what to do with it and how to invest it. And so that journey was interesting in itself. I mean, we had a business that went from 700,000 a year in revenue in our first year that we built it to 500 million in GMV and sales in like a 4 or 5 year period. And so it was pretty crazy. But, you know, in building that business, your job as a founder, when you go on to raise a ton of money and you're building, you know, what we want to become the next $100 billion opportunity, you have to kind of continue to see around the corner and innovate and think about what can put this business out of business, or where's the bigger opportunity and where should we be headed. And I think it was really clear a few years in that we needed to work with the retailers. By partnering with the retailers, it unlocked way more value because it was way easier to find, you know, to partner with Sephora, should I say, and have an API where we can get an unlimited amount of gift cards on the site, rather than trying to find 1,000 women that had a spare Sephora gift card in a makeup drawer. And so that really became what our focus has been in the business. And it's really hard to change things when they're going really well. I mean, we had a business that was growing double digits month over month. And I went to the board and I'm like, guys, I think we're doing this wrong. We have to rethink about this business. I think there's a bigger opportunity here. And without the retailers, our business will never scale. It will never be profitable. It will never realize its full potential. And so we went back and literally rebuilt everything. We brought down revenue. We got rid of certain cards. We got rid of merchandise credits and store credit and store credit. We made a lot of really difficult decisions that were pretty dark and difficult days, I would say, for a couple years there. And it just goes to show you that, you know, you have to focus on being a great business and not just be a good business and be content. And, you know, we weren't rushing for the exit or looking to sell the business. You know, I wanted to build something special. And so ultimately we made those decisions. I think it took longer than we thought it was going to take. So it had its own set of challenges. But today, really, our focus is working with retailers. We have 600 retail partners that sell directly on our platform, from Walmart and Lowe's and Home Depot and, you know, all the largest retailers out there, airlines, hotels, and whatnot. We can, our product and our cards can be redeemed across more than 400,000 physical locations and online. And so now we're really starting to scale that business again. We've launched a few new features. We've launched a new product called Raise Pay and Slide. Those businesses in an 18-month period are doing, one is on 100 million plus run rate already. The other we launched just 2.5, 3 months ago is already on a 15 million run rate. So both growing really quickly, and shows you that, you know, you always have to invest in the future and where we think the industry is going in order to kind of build towards that $100 billion opportunity.
And George, this year, unfortunately, we had COVID happen, and in retail and e-com, this was a curse and a blessing accordingly. So you saw this coming because we had the early warnings from China, and we're in March 2020. You're in Chicago. You're at the board meeting with your directors. What was going on in your head at the time?
I was scared, to be honest. I was worried because there were so many unknowns, and you heard this narrative and you heard different things that were going on across the world, but I think we were somewhat negligent to what was going on at the time. And it really was a failure, I think, on our part, on our country's part, in many different ways to really prepare for the unknown and understand what the magnitude really could be of the COVID fallout, and what that meant for not only us, but for the entire world. And I thought our business was going to drop 70 or 80%. I mean, given the fact that so many of our transactions happen in store at retail, we're so dependent on people's share of spend and of the wallet. And we saw some really interesting trends early on. Actually, in the beginning, the inverse happened. Our business spiked 20%. And when we looked into the data, it was people that were buying all essential goods. This is when the toilet paper rush was happening and the mass panic of it all. And people were stockpiling stored value, grocery, gas, other things. It was almost like kind of this apocalyptic time in our world. And right after, I think a lot of the craze, our business dropped like 30, 40%. And that's when we're like, oh God, we got to do something. Like, what's happening? And so we all sat together, and credit to the team. I mean, it really started and stopped with them. We were really data driven in our approach and what we do. And we started looking at product shifts and what people started spending money at based on zip code, county, city, state. We really looked at it from a micro and macro level of what was happening. And we started seeing spikes in e-commerce, on demand. We started seeing spikes in home improvement. People were at home. There was a lockdown. They were bored. They wanted to fix things around the house. And those trends only accelerated. We saw a quick deceleration in travel, which tanked. Food, which are physical restaurants, not grocery, tanked. And those categories went from what were 15, 16 million bucks a month to one, and you can imagine what was going on in all of our heads thinking, what does this look like? But, I think ultimately over the last, call it, 7, 8 months or so, our business on average has probably softened around 15% for the year, which I think in any event is a big win. I think our board definitely agrees because I think looking back, there's always things you could have done maybe better or reacted quicker. But there's the other side, which is, there's a lot of business that have completely lost their company and their businesses and employees that, and folks that are out of jobs, in the tens of millions. And so we were able to do so without making, a bunch of sweeping changes. We actually put together a couple slides, which I think may be helpful for us to talk through or look at as far as the impact of COVID pre and post, which we can share.
I think that's a great idea because you at Raise have the vantage point of being a little bit like an index fund of what's going on with e-com as well as retail. And I think, you saw what happened in the first phase of COVID during the lockdown and what has been the case, afterwards.
Completely. So, as you can imagine, we were pretty spot on with what we thought the trends were going to be, Netflix, streaming, gaming, telemedicine, grocery. I mean, they're all things I'm sure we'll talk about after as far as are these trends here to stay or what do we think of them in the future? But we can see right now just purely the categories, that we're looking at. So we're looking at just the categories purely, that we've put on these trends, and you can see that stay at home, increased spend, increased on home and office improvements by, double-digit margins, entertainment, DIY health and beauty and care. So again, home and office, which were people that realized they had to work from home. And so they had to upgrade their cameras and their equipment and their microphones and all these other things to prepare themselves for what remote work actually looked like and life out of the office. Takeout and delivery, massive increase in takeout and delivery. And we'll show you on the next slide what that ended up looking like. So these are the likes of Grubhub and DoorDash and Uber Eats and whatnot that we've seen with trends. Tech and gaming, Xbox, Activision, EA, V-Bucks and all these other things, health and beauty, which was a big surprise to me. People weren't really going out and doing much, but in my mind, I'm like, do people want to look better on camera when they're zooming? They just want to feel better. I know myself, like I had to get up and get ready every day and get dressed and look presentable to feel fine, even though we were locked up. So that was pretty funny. But you can see where the massive decrease was: travel, restaurant, retail, across the top 100 brands. I think you'll see in things that accelerated, junk food and fast food was started growing really quickly, because unfortunately it's not just that any of us want to stay home and gain weight eating fast food. There were tens of millions of people that were out of work. And so eating out at expensive restaurants was no longer an option. It came all about, eating at home and cooking all the meals and shopping at the grocery store or eating fast food. And so if we actually look at the next slide, we can see some additional brands and what ended up happening with these specific categories. You'll see Home Depot, Lowe's, massive spikes, people repainting their homes and doing that. Office Depot, purely supplies and whatnot. You'll see takeout and delivery, massive spike. I mean, the DoorDash thing really stood out to us because we actually launched DoorDash in the middle of the pandemic. And so we saw this massive spike from a zero basis. But again, Grubhub has been a longstanding partner, and you'll start seeing some additional fast food. A lot of folks turn to healthier food, Nutrisystem, working out at home, buying weights. Value retailers started growing quickly. So we'll see those percentages in retail, again, health and beauty, and then tech and gaming. Huge spike in Apple gift cards, which could be used in the iTunes store for gaming, mobile gaming. We saw a huge surge there. And then just all the various gaming and streaming platforms where we saw a lot of growth. And then on the inverse, travel, restaurant brands were mostly affected in non-essential business. So, massive drop in Disney. That is very much so both retail and the parks, which we saw a huge drop in. Hotels.com, travel booking, the cruises, the airlines, Uber. And it's funny because if you actually look at this data and you look at the stock market and you look at the stock prices of these companies, they really mirrored what we saw happening, obviously with the exception of Disney and some, because they have other businesses. But, it was really interesting to see a lot of this information, because we were able to see not only what was being affected right off the bat, but now with a lot of the openings, and the reopening of our country and depending on, city, state, and at a federal level, we're starting to see certain retailers come back, or whenever there's a closure and a city goes back into lockdown, right away we saw the drop off, and we see it in real time, which has been really interesting as far as I've thought about my own personal portfolio of what I should be investing in. But these are some slides we're happy to share and send out to everyone in any event as a follow-up, but it just kind of gives you an idea of a snapshot on what this has looked like.
Terrific, George. Thank you for sharing this information. And as you're looking into this data, you're a founder, you're an investor as well. For the founders or aspiring founders and the investors in the audience, where do you see the opportunities today? And, here in Greece, we're already experiencing the second lockdown. A lot of Europe is on a similar mode. Where do you see opportunities as a founder, as an investor?
Yeah, I think one is, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and COVID will go away one day. And, we will learn a lot from this. And I think in moments of where we've been challenged, in moments where there have been pandemics and other things at a global scale, we've always come back from them. And I think we've seen the greatest rate of innovation. We've seen some of the best businesses that have been built. And a lot of people are inspired to build things and solve really complex problems. And I look at some of these things in multiple buckets, and I think we can talk, this can be its own discussion, but, I think there's still massive opportunity in the on-demand category. When I look at grocery delivery, I mean, all these businesses are growing like a weed. On-demand everything, I think is a hot category that is here to stay. I look at telemedicine, another hot category, just improving, the engagement and the relationship between, doctor and patient, or us looking to things for advice or help. I look at ed tech and education. What does remote learning really look like? And, I think that is here to stay. I think there will be an evolution of what that is. I don't think children will be at home on Zoom all day rather than being in classrooms in the future. But, I think as far as, when you're sick or you're out of work, will streaming be, or will streaming be readily available in all classrooms in the event somebody isn't there, so they can participate? What does learning look like? I think at a global scale, there are a lot of interesting things there. I think we've seen the rise of gaming and esports in general, where gaming appeals to all ages, and kind of all demographics and whatnot. I think there are a lot of these trends that are here to stay, that will continue to grow. And if there's one thing I think that this has proven is, I think these have all been pretty obvious. I don't want to say we're reinventing the wheel. I think there were things that we were seeing in real time happening over the years, where maybe 10 years from now, we thought more people were going to be ordering groceries and more people were going to be learning from home or working remotely and all that. I think what ended up happening is all of that happened in weeks' time. And you saw, $100 billion opportunities in industries that were literally spun up overnight. And so I think those will continue. And I think there will be opportunities to optimize services, software, or products that help those thrive and help those continue to succeed. One of the big things I look at is e-commerce. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. Everything that enables e-commerce, everything that helps make it more efficient, faster, better, whatever it may be, is a huge opportunity. And that's not just in the technology world, that's offline as well. I look at fulfillment centers, people that are investing in real estate. Fulfillment centers is massive, making the pick and packing more efficient. There are new technologies. I was just pitched by a company recently that helps packers pick faster, even in traditional places like grocery stores, where there are sensors, where traditional packing may take 15 minutes. This brings it down to 6 minutes, because you're able to identify where certain things are. So it may tell you aisle 2, row 5, item 6, so you're able to pack faster. So I think, all these trends, both at a micro and macro level, are here to stay. I think there's a ton of opportunity there. And I'm just really excited. I'm really bullish. I think not just, because of the pandemic and things that have happened, I've invested in more businesses these last 6 or 7 months than I ever have before, with what we're seeing. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. I'd like to think it's a good thing, but even just looking at Greece, I mean, we've talked about this. We've been tested for the last 10 years, in our own pandemic in one way or another. It's a financial one, but I think in coming out of that, you have seen some amazing entrepreneurs, some amazing businesses, and are already seeing the fruits of the labor of exits that have happened, that are a fairly large scale. And I think those entrepreneurs will come back and continue to invest in the ecosystem and help find those great companies.
That's correct. Yeah. And both you and I are very passionate about all things Greek and Greek entrepreneurship, here in Greece, also in the States and Europe. And I know a lot of our audience is passionate about what's going on in Greeks or with Greeks in tech. What are some areas where you have seen real promise? Since you are such a good investor, networker, like what are some of the folks that you would say they're doing amazing things?
I think there's, we have, and this is something I'm so proud of, I think some of the most talented, intelligent, and driven people in the world. And I think sometimes we're a bit last minute when it comes down to things, but somehow it's always the Greek way, we pull it together. And things that I'm excited about, I think there's a lot in architecture and software, purely infrastructure businesses, SaaS. I think design and development are some of the best I've ever seen in the Greek ecosystem. Consumer is really interesting to me. Marketplaces, grocery, things that kind of follow these trends. But I'm bullish and I'm excited about what's happening in the Greek ecosystem and ultimately abroad, even outside of Greece.
Totally. So now it's a good time for the audience to send us any questions. Our friend 𝗶𝗰 𝗂𝗃, who is a founder from Greece and now living overseas in Europe, he's asking the question, George, what's the short-term trend due to COVID, which you think is not here to stay?
I've gone back and forth on this a lot. I'm still not convinced that remote work, the way we know it, on the one extreme in COVID, will last long term. I miss our employees and my coworkers. I miss seeing them. I miss being in the trenches and feeling like there's that camaraderie, there together, working late, working hard. It's difficult to do it on the computer. It's difficult to do it at home. And I'm fortunate enough right now that I don't have kids running around in the background and a bunch of distractions, but I really feel for a lot of those people because it's tough. I don't think it's become easier. I think it's become harder. I think managing the kids, having to do all these things while focusing on work, dealing with the challenges of life in its own way, have been difficult. And I miss going to the office. I think a lot of people miss going to the office. I think there were a lot of companies that prematurely have said, hey, well, we're going to go remote forever. And I think people really want to go to an office. They want to work. I think there will be a hybrid of those things. Maybe it's working at home one day a week. Because I think it is very beneficial for parents to help run the house and do things or save on commuting. But I'm not convinced that long term that's here to stay.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we're seeing now from our portfolio companies, a number of the founders or senior executives are already heading at the office if they are the place where they can do that. And especially the ones who have little ones at home are the first ones to be very eager to go back to the office and have some a quiet time and a focused environment to do deep work in. So 𝗶𝗰 𝗂𝗃, who is the executive director at the Massachusetts Innovation Network, has the following question. George, where do you see work from home ending up, and how do you think that may impact the real estate market? And I think that's pretty prescient question to be asked to you because you've invested quite a bit in real estate yourself, your family, in the US and Greece too.
Yeah, look, I think work from home, I think we touched on it a bit. I think we'll slowly wean off it. I don't think tomorrow just everyone's going to show up at the office tomorrow and it's going to be back to normal. I think it's going to be a slow process. If I had to put a timeline in, I think it's, over the next 2 to 3 years. It's not a 6-month kind of thing. Even if this vaccine is as successful as we're being told it is, and it is widely distributed, I think there's still going to be a barrier there. And I think there's going to be some adjusting. And unfortunately, there are difficult conversations that are being had in the real estate side of things. In our families has had a lot of those conversations in our real estate portfolio. But again, I mean, we want to work with our tenants. We want to work with the businesses. We're not there for the short term. When you sign up for a 10-year lease or a 20-year lease, you're committing to something over the long term, and we want to be long-term partners. We want to work with those businesses and help them succeed and survive because they're a big part of our success. And so, the way that they're there for us in the good times, we need to be there for them in the bad times. And I know those are difficult conversations because there's a lot of pressure from banks and institutions. But unfortunately, I think with what we're seeing in these large office buildings, these big institutions that have invested a lot of capital, they knew the risks going into this. When they were jacking up these rents and refinancing and taking capital off the table, and they knew the risks. And so, I don't want to say I don't feel bad for them with what's happening, but now is not the time to starve the businesses and because you're in trouble and you've to return a bunch of capital to your LPs prematurely without focusing on what the security or what the potential downside can be. We know that these things come in cycles, and every 7 to 10 years there's something that has come up. I think there's been a big lapse of judgment, and I think that we've been spoiled by a lot of the really good times, and I myself am guilty of that. By this big run up that we've had this last 10 years. And whether that continues or not, I think it's a big learning lesson for many of us as far as what we should do and how we should plan in the future.
Absolutely. And also it makes the case for WeWork being a pretty good idea for somebody to be starting today.
Yeah,
Because in a world where companies and their talent don't show up at the office every day, probably you won't need so much space be allocated to commercial real estate just for office space. So a hybrid solution like that WeWork offers maybe, a long-term trend that has a lot of growth potential in it.
completely. I think there's so much padding in the modern office that we got used to. It's where an office was 50 or 100 square feet a person, it became like 200-300 square feet because we needed the restaurant in the office. We needed the you have companies that have laundromats and dry cleaners in their campuses, and I think there's so much excess that we've gotten so spoiled with that the reality is I actually prefer a tight knit environment where everyone's kind of close together and in the trenches. And if there are people that are uncomfortable with that, in the foreseeable future, there is the work from home option, as we did say.
Totally. So Sareem has a question around payment processing, George. So how will the spike in e-commerce activity change the payment processing industry?
I think it will actually thrive more. One, because if you look at PayPal, Square, and all these payment businesses, even Stripe on the private side, Niko, you being an investor, these businesses are all growing faster than they ever have before. PayPal, in my mind, we're fortunate to have them as an investor in our business. Is here to stay, and I think that's $1 trillion business one day. As more transactions come online, they have the benefit of more and more e-commerce sales, which will help them grow. I think when you look at interchange when card is not present online is way more expensive than it is offline. For instance, at a grocery store, when you're swiping a physical card, I think it is more profitable in an online use case. I think we're getting smarter with chargebacks. Technology continues to improve. We're seeing a lot of companies that are solving really big problems as far as chargebacks and risk. And we've built a whole division called R0 that deals with fraud. And I think the team is best in class. There's going to be a lot of innovation and a lot of potential opportunity in that space. But I think that whole space will continue to grow. At the same time, I'm very big in crypto and that world and what that looks like. But there is still a processing component to those businesses because ultimately, they have to show that there's some type of profitability or unit economics that makes sense there.
Yeah, that's correct. So we have a question from 𝗵𝗰𝗼𝗲𝗲𝗲, who is the founder of 𝗛𝗲𝗲𝗲 𝗵𝗲 and she says that the alcohol, beverage, and delivery industries have been growing through the roof, which is something that I don't think we touched upon, but at least from what we're seeing from our portfolio companies, Instacart and Deliveroo GC, it's absolutely the case. And also what we're anecdotally hearing from a number of people that we work with, unfortunately, a lot of us, have become daytime alcoholics in order to deal with COVID and the stresses of remote work and family work at home. So she has a question because she's also she's running a young business. George, do you have any advice or referrals for digital marketing people for CPG?
Yes, I'll look in. I'll happy to take it offline and potentially help out. There as far as on-demand delivery, alcohol, and all that. There's margin. There's a lot to play with. I think there's a lot of services and opportunity, and you have DoorDash, Postmates, and others that are now leveraging their network of drivers and some of the downtime that they've had to turn them into on-demand delivery workers for third-party companies. And so I think there is a faster way to do this than there ever has been before, where before you needed to recruit your own drivers, recruit your own team and whatnot. I think they've solved a lot of those issues, and you can build that into a pro forma and financial plan that makes sense from a unit economic standpoint. But, sadly, I think more and more people are turning to drinking at home, and, the stresses of these things have gotten to a lot of people, and it's difficult. Alcohol stores have been deemed essential business. The same way with dispensaries. I can't tell you guys how crazy this has been. I live in Chicago, and they had made marijuana legal, and there are lines outside of every dispensary, literally 24/7 in Chicago, of people waiting to get in line to go buy. And I think my mom has had her own opinions of what essential business should be, because she hasn't been able to go to church. But I understand that too. I feel for everyone. I think it's a difficult time. There are a lot of people dealing with real stuff in life, and it's not just financial. I think, yeah, that's certainly one really important part of this, but I think even more important is the health side of things. Let's not forget, there are over 1 million people that have died from this, and many more that unfortunately will. And a lot of those people are close to home, people that have been affected, employees, colleagues, friends. And so I think it's a time to be there for people. I think it's a challenging time for many of us in many different ways. But I think hopefully, like I said, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we're on our way and on a path to recovery.
Yeah. So let me run through a couple of questions, more questions from the audience. So Alec Harris was a notable Greek American out of the Boston area, and he's been a great cheerleader and supporter of all the Greek tech and entrepreneurial activities. He has, I think, a compelling question, which is like, George, what advice would you give to your younger self today?
There is so much. Because life is full of mistakes in general, but entrepreneurship is like, you can write a book of many series of mistakes. And I think I've admittedly made more mistakes in building a business than I probably have done great and amazing things that have been transformative. And I think ultimately, you're hard on yourself. I think one thing we realize as we're growing up is, I think when you're young, you think you know everything. And as you get older, we realize we know nothing, and we always want to constantly learn and try to evolve and try to grow. I think a lot of things are, you're going to get punched in the face and you're going to get knocked down. And I think it's how you respond to that and how you get back up and how you bounce back. And, that's a big part. I think continuing to maintain and protect the culture are big things, because I think culture is most challenged in the difficult times, not in the good times, when you're giving everybody things and everybody's making more money and getting new benefits. And, we're throwing crazy parties and doing that. Like, everybody loves to work there, and it's the best place to work. Like, why wouldn't we love being here? But I think culture is defined, like, when things get really hard and it's really difficult and you're going through some pressing times, like, who's rolling up their sleeves and talking about, let's make this company great. And when your back's against the wall, how do you respond to these things and come back from it? I think that is something, I wish I focused on less of the good times, more of the difficult times. And, luckily it wasn't too late and we were able to jump on those things and salvage it. But I think identifying the culture early and what it is and who you want to be and know what you want that to be like in good and bad times is really critical for the success of the company.
That's right. So one final question from the audience, and that's a personal one for you and your family. So, George, are you planning on investing in Greece? If yes, which sectors offer the most opportunity? This is a question from Dimitri. I'll just add to that. Maybe it's a good segue also of talking a bit about like how your family got involved into the sports sector in Greece.
Yeah, so my brother actually bought a Greek soccer team called 𝗶𝗲𝗲 in Crete. So he's the chairman and president of the team, and he's done wonders with the team. And I tip my hat and give him all the credit in the world of what he's done. One, because of the progress that he's made, but two, Greek soccer had its own image and this tainted kind of very dirty kind of game. And I think he's come in and like any entrepreneur has rolled his sleeves up and wanted to solve a problem and legitimize the sport. And I think you've seen what he's done there. And so that's one thing my family's invested in that we're very bullish on is sports and media in general. I think anything tourism, Greece is hot. It's going to be hot. It's going to continue to be hot. Is really a really interesting opportunity. And I would say lastly, like anything real estate, I am so bullish on in Greece as far as opportunity. I think there are so many programs that have been created between the EU, with the banks. Obviously, COVID's not a great example of that right now, but like we said, COVID will go away. And I think there is massive opportunity to leverage a lot of these programs in the EU and leverage a lot of these programs that exist in Greece that I think some of the brilliant people that work under the prime minister have helped develop and helped establish that are very thoughtful, are young, are progressive in their thinking and their mindset, that everyone should be taking advantage of and learning as much as they can about. And those are things that we're looking at as far as, you know, real estate, tourism, media, and sports. Infrastructure, I think, is a huge opportunity in Greece. You know, infrastructure will be needed. Increases in tourism will put more pressure on, you know, just our ordinary systems, water, sewage, you know, just everything you can think of in a modern economy that's been democratized. Like those are ways that we should be thinking of what Greece 2.0 look like.
Terrific. Okay, so I think this is a wrap for our conversation. So George, on behalf of the Hellenic Innovation Network, thank you for being with us today and for sharing your wisdom. I'd like to hand it back to Vassilis and Stratos, who are gonna tell you a little bit about our next event on December 10th, which is gonna be about research, commercialization, and exit, the story of Helix acquisition by Ansys, which is a great story of another Greek founder who started the company and had a great presence here in Greece as well.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And if there's any other questions anybody has, you can always feel free to email me, george@raise.com. I don't say it lightly. I'm always willing, able, and happy to help. You know, not only just other fellow Greeks and folks that have questions, but anyone else that tuned in. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you all. Bye.